What fears do you have in real life?
What fears do I have in real life? Ooh, you're giving me you're not lobbing any softballs at me, are you? Why do you ask?
Oh, well, curious. How do you use your fears when writing? So that was the reason. So you don't have to tell us what your fears are, but how do you utilize those fears while you're writing?
That's a great question. I'm working on something right now, and I'm trying to think of the fear is always, is this going to work? Is this going to, is this going to, does this make sense? Am I going to fully, am I going to fully explore this premise? And I think that's why it's important to write the first draft quickly, but not so quickly that you don't really explore it. I think a lot of Stephen King talks about it in his book On Writing. He said he says he writes his first drafts. He tries to write them in 3 months because it's enough time to get the story down, but it's not so much time that I get into my head and try and because when we get into our heads, we can get stuck. We start to get logical with it. So that's about the best I can answer with the fears.
How does one get in better touch with their fears?
I don't know that we. I don't know that we need to. I think by doing the fear exercise and just simply writing them down, I don't. I think if you make them conscious, I don't know that it's that difficult to get in touch with your fears. I think we all have pretty. I mean, I've been teaching this for decades, and I've never met a writer who has any trouble accessing their fears.
And you've said, I believe, that a writer's fears are sort of a pot of gold?
Well, the writer's fears are the pot of gold because once you connect to them and notice where they live for your protagonist in the story, you're writing from a place of truth. You're writing from a place of vulnerability. And when you're writing from that place, the story has a chance to become universal.
What if a writer says, I don't want to put my fears in the story. My fears are irrelevant. I have this character and they have a greater life than I have.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Your fears are universal. So they're human. I'm not talking about your specific fear. It's not like my fear of spiders. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the nature of your fears. And so if let's say I'm afraid of spiders, and my protagonist is my protagonist, it's the fears that I have in writing this story. It's not my neuroses. It's not my particular phobias that I'm talking about.
Okay, so you're talking about the actual act of writing and the fears that go along with
Right.
that. Okay, not the fact that they don't like heights or...
No, No, it's the nature of my fears. So I'm afraid to write this because people will judge me. People will realize what a weirdo I am. All that stuff. And then when you start to look at your story, you go, oh my God, look at that. My protagonist is actually, if I really start to connect to them, is afraid of what people will think. They're afraid they're a weirdo, therefore nobody will love them, or etc. And so when you connect to that fear, you're really connecting to the truth of your protagonist.
And so to get over that, you've talked about, sort of exposing the story in your 90-day workshops.
Yeah.
But is it where someone is okay with the fact, well, if they just hate me, I'll just be in a cabin in the woods and doesn't matter, or they own it and they're okay owning whatever it is they're afraid of in the writing?
Well, yeah, I believe that the desire to write is the desire to evolve, or to resolve something we're seeking to understand. So, just going back to what I said earlier, our story comes to us as an invitation to let go of this limiting belief. Oh my God, if people don't like this thing that I wrote, I'll disintegrate, I'll just wither. And then you realize that, no, the truth is that the truth is something entirely other than that. I really believe that every story ultimately is about love. That love is the mystery that's always on the table. And by love, I'm not talking about romantic love or familial love. I mean self-love. And if you look at any story, it's often the journey from some limiting belief they have to an experience of self-love, even if it's a tragedy. The self-love is for the audience. We see the cost of not loving oneself in a tragedy. And self-love manifests itself in an infinite number of ways. So do you understand what I mean? Self-love isn't, I'm not talking about some sort of sentimental notion of, or some sort of new age idea of self-love, but finding one's voice, standing up for the truth, taking the risk of opening one's heart in one way or another. Every story really is about either, is this protagonist in one way or another going to open their heart, or are they going to suffer the consequences of not doing so?
So it could be The Sound of Music or Leaving Las Vegas. It doesn't matter. It's
Right.
the same. It's all about love. It's still at the core.
Yeah. I think it is. I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you could say one, their love for themselves was obvious and for their family. The other, their lack of love for themselves cost them.
Right. And I'm not talking about some egoic love where I'm not talking about the ego. I'm talking about the willingness to be in one's truth, the willingness to set a boundary, the willingness to be humble, the willingness to find compassion. It's one way or another. Story is about the human spirit. It's not intellectual. That's why we're always drawn to story, because it's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's not math. It transcends logic. It makes no sense when one opens, when one opens their hearts, and yet to not do so makes life unlivable.